So an intelligent person knows that there's two sides to things and remains objective and asks proper questions intuitively to get those up to the surface so you're not blinded by an infatuation, resentment, an impulse or instinct. And the gullible person is going to want the quick fix.
How do entrepreneurs, business owners, and experts influence themselves, their clients, and teams to maximize profitability, efficiency, and create lasting impact? How do they simplify life and business and yet still achieve more? What's the one thing separating the mediocre from the best? This podcast will give you the answers and reveal the secret strengths and the not-so-easy-to-admit flaws of the elite. My name is Satori Mateo, and welcome to the Half-Ass to Badass podcast. Have you ever read a book on personal development, maybe been through some course or been to a seminar that promised to change your life, and it didn't really work out the way you thought it would? Maybe you were super pumped, you were full of energy right after, right? But then the high wore off. Ever had that feeling? I know I've had many times. It was so disappointing. And it was not until I heard a different perspective that life took on a whole new meaning. The man you're about to hear today inspired me to start looking at things through a different lens. Sometimes a small shift in perspective can make a huge difference. The man you're about to meet today will share some of his wisdom that he has synthesized from thousands of years of great minds, from theologians, Nobel Prize winners, to the best in science, business, finance, and health. Let's welcome Dr. John Demartini to this episode. Okay, welcome to the call, John. It's so great to have you here, and I feel really inspired to have you with us. And this will be an epic conversation. And if you're listening to this right now, you're going to want to take notes because this will be one of those episodes that you will want to listen to many times over. And I can't wait to have you listen to this because it's going to be an amazing conversation. So before we go deep on all the great stuff we're going to talk about today, I have this one question that I do ask all my guests at the beginning of each show, and I'm curious to know your perspective on it. And that question is, what's the difference between a half-ass and a badass?
That's a good question. That's a tricky question, since I always said an ass is an awakened spiritual service. So bad service versus half quality service. I don't know. I don't know if I could answer that, but I guess you could say it depends on the perspective.
Yes.
A badass is somebody that could be a badass singer.
Yes.
Could be a morally quote bad asshole type of person. Half-ass is somebody that's putting half their energy into something. I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean,
that sounds like a good.
Yeah, because we the way I talk about it and define it, it's kind of like, when you're half-assing things, you're not putting your attention into it. You're not purposeful. You're not dedicated to the things that matter, and you kind of moseying around.
I've been labeled both in my life, depending on what people project onto me.
Yes.
When they project onto me expectations that aren't really high on my values, and they say, "Well, you're only doing a half-assed job," and I feel like, okay, well, at least I'm not a big ass. And then they say that sometimes, you're a badass. That was a badass call you made or a badass lecture you gave. And I go, was that good or bad? And they go, well, that was great. I go, okay. I've also been called a badass. I guess it all depends on the context.
Yes. Yeah. I love that. Great. So I know you've had a very inspiring life in so many different ways. Would you like to just share with your backstory? And I know you probably shared your backstory a million times, but it's always great for people that don't know, your background and your backstory. How did you become the man that travels the world teaching and inspiring people and, doing what you do?
Well, in a brief version, I had learning problems as a child. I was a high school dropout. I wanted to surf. I first hitchhiked from Houston, Texas, where the surf wasn't the greatest, to California. And eventually I panhandled enough money to make it to Hawaii. I surfed up and down the coast of California, Mexico for a while. And by the time I was 15, I left for California at 14. When I was 15, I made it to Hawaii. And at 17, almost 18, I nearly died of strychnine cyanide poisoning. I was living in a tent at the time, and I was led to a health food store to help recover from that, and then to a class that Paul Bragg gave. And one night, Paul Bragg, with one message in 1 hour, really, really got to me and inspired me to overcome my learning problems and challenges in reading and to want to do something more with my life. And I had a dream at that night to learn how to read, someday be intelligent, try to go back to school because I was a high school dropout, and become a teacher. And that was in 1972. And here I am. I had to go and learn how to learn. I failed when I first started back to school, and I ended up eventually getting determined to not give up. And with the help of my mom, I learned how to memorize words and learn how to read eventually, and eventually become a scholar. And I can't think of anything else I love doing more than researching, learning, and traveling and teaching. So that's what I do. People go, why do you do that? You don't need to do that. Why do you do that? There's nothing more inspiring for me than to learn. This morning, I learned two things that were great. You may think that they're trivia, but for literally hundreds, if not thousands of years, they wanted to know why there's 11-year sunspot cycle.
Okay.
And that's been a mystery. They thought it was sort of a heliomagnetic system in the center and the churning of the convection zones of the thing, which are all correlated with it. But somebody just did the math and figured out the movements of Venus, Earth, and Jupiter and how they move around the solar system and their orbital periods. And they mapped out a magnificent, almost perfect correlation with the things over the last 1,000 years.
Wow.
And that's been a mystery for hundreds, if not 2,000 something years almost. And they figured it out. It was solved.
Wow.
So that was the thing. Then there's another thing that I did. So I'm researching every day.
Yes.
I've been teaching for nearly 40 years on life cycles of stars, the life cycles, and that there's intelligence, a panpsychic intelligence that's stored in all the biological organisms that grow in a solar system. Because there's probably sentient solar systems with bacteria or something on it that we anticipate finding. And all the information is not lost. It's eventually absorbed into the solar system, put into a black hole, put into the center of the galaxy, and spewed back out. And all the information is then reused again to reactivate biological molecules for the potential for growth again and bacterial growth. And so that was a discovery that was out this week also, and it's confirmed that we now know that that's recycling. I've been teaching it for 40 years, but it's finally seeing the science come forward. Some of my students, when they saw this research, they sent me and said, well, that's what you've been teaching for 40 years. I said, I know. I knew they would find it, but they finally found it today. So I'm constantly researching anything to do with the evolvement of human consciousness at any scale, from subatomics to astronomics, and anywhere in between, to help people maximize their human awareness and potential. And that's been my love since I was 17.
Wow. Yeah. And it's amazing because, I read, your books and listened to all your audios, and I think you can listen to them over and over and over and always learn something new from there. So it's always fascinating to me what you get to hear every time you listen.
Well, I was sent an email today saying I say too much. Calm it down. They said, you say too much and the brain can't absorb it all. I said, well, it depends. Some people can. Someone like yourself is brilliant, can absorb it, like that. Some people, they have to stop and chew on it for a while and digest it a bit.
Yeah.
But, Poincaré, the mathematician, I studied his life many years ago, and he had a father that was very strict. And his father said that you're going to learn piano, my son. And he said, well, I don't really want to learn piano. He said, you're going to learn it because it's going to give you advantages to learn how to use different parts of the brain, the math involved, the music involved, the finger coordination. It's going to help your brain and develop. It's going to give you advantages in life. So he hated the idea of doing it, but he went, and he liked mathematics. He didn't have a problem with math, but he wanted to go to this music class. And his teacher was one of these high-end, really masters of music, and didn't want to sit there and teach a young kid. It's like starting from scratch. But so he's really tough on Poincaré. And so in the process of doing it, he gave him to this class, and it was overwhelming to him, and he wanted to cry, and he wanted to fight. And the next class, the same thing. And for 10 classes, he was overwhelmed by all the knowledge and all this extra information. He's like, I've never used this. Why am I doing this? And he was really frustrated. But at the end of 10 classes, when he finished it, went home and he would just want to give up, he goes, oh, finally, one more class to go. On the 11th class, the teacher said, now play the first class lesson. And to his surprise, he was able to do it almost perfectly. Wow. And he couldn't believe that he did it. He was just brought to tears. And then he said, now play the second class, Poincaré. And the same thing happened. He was able to go through all the different things that he thought he didn't learn consciously, and found out that he did it to his surprise, and he went and hugged the teacher. And I've always been a believer that ever since I was 24, when I was speaking to a group of dentists, and the dentist asked me a challenging question, and out of my consciousness came this information that was photographic from a book that I'd read that I didn't even know that I knew. And it came surfacing. I realized that we have conscious awareness, we have unconscious awareness. And most people limit their learning to their conscious awareness and don't realize that the unconscious has a vast amount of information that we're taking in from reading that may not be verbally cognitive, but is there. And I all of a sudden started trusting that unconscious and just go ahead and speed reading and allowing information to go in. And then when I really needed it, when somebody challenges me or when I really needed it and had a missionful reason for it, I noticed it would surface. And I love questions and answers because I get to find out what I know that I didn't know I know. And so I'm a firm believer that, pushing yourself has valid impact. But sometimes we limit ourselves to our conscious awareness and think we can't do things. Right. And that's a metaphor for many areas of life, not just in learning.
Yes. Which leads me to the question I have. One of the things that I've seen throughout 25 plus years of exploring personal development, personal growth, business growth, all kinds of things of learning, right? And obviously you've been doing this for 40 plus years, right? So
47 most.
Yeah, and so a lot of people that try to and I've heard you speak about this as well, is that people try to sell you the fantasy. And I notice that people get this, customers get disappointed, and they either themselves or on their teacher or people. What are your thoughts on that? What have you seen? Has it gotten worse throughout the years, or people trying to sell the fantasy? What is your perspective on that?
I don't know if it's gotten more or less. I don't know if I've ever really explored the percentages, but we have our advanced forebrain, medial prefrontal cortex, executive center, telencephalon, the most advanced part of the brain. And we also have subcortical areas of the brain. And those layers are involved in more survival mechanisms instead of thrival mechanisms. And when we're in a thrival mechanism, we're more objective. We're more balanced oriented. And we're able to see both sides of things. And we have the wisdom of seeing both sides. Because, when you get infatuated with somebody, you assume that there's all upsides and no downsides. When you get resentful to somebody, you think there's no downside or all downsides, no upsides. And you're skewing your perspective with a subjective bias. And you're not seeing things as they are. And that's an amygdala function down in the subcortical area. But when you see people for who they are, to see both sides, you can love and respect somebody, you see both sides. So the executive center is involved in looking carefully beyond your first bias and see both sides. And the amygdala is more like immediate gratification of looking for an immediate reaction, because a predator could eat you or prey could get away from you. So you got to respond quick, and you have to have a false positive skewing of your perceptions, because it's better to have a false positive assumption that it's all a predator and it's all prey, because otherwise they'll pass you by and you'll get eaten or you'll get away from food. You won't get your food. So we automatically subjectively bias and distort things. And we're vulnerable to that when we're in our amygdala. So if somebody comes along and sells us something that's all pleasure, no pain, the amygdala is vulnerable to it. And it will immediately go after it and buy it without thinking. And if we see something that's terrible and we're really frightening, we'll immediately try to run from it, an instinct from it, before we think about it. But if we see both sides of things, we'll be more objective. And the truth is we have both sides. If I look in my mirror at myself, I'm not a nice person or a mean person. I have times when I'm nice, I'm mean. I'm kind, I'm cruel. I'm positive, I'm negative. I'm honest, I'm dishonest. I'm pleasureful, I'm painful. I'm peaceful and warful. I'm kind, I'm cruel. I'm generous, I'm stingy. I'm everything. So to be objective is to see both sides instead of being skewed by the other side. So when somebody comes along and sells a fantasy, the amygdala is vulnerable to it at any time. And people that haven't learned and gained wisdom and lived wisely in their forebrain are vulnerable to their amygdala and their hindbrain's reactions like an animal. And they're vulnerable to get rich quick schemes, happiness schemes, drug schemes that give them the quick fix instead of actually a long-term patient vision. Like investing, and the people that want to get rich quick usually don't do well, but the people that are methodical and strategic and live in their executive center without the emotions, usually the ones that they're patiently, methodically building the wealth that they want over a strategy following.
That's interesting you say that, because a lot of people that are listening to this podcast, and a lot of them are entrepreneurs, and there are other people as well, but they're entrepreneurs that in families, they're looking to create a life that's going to be meaningful and fulfilling, and they're looking for these, different answers I'm not the only podcast they're listening to, right? They listen to a lot of podcasts, but when you go to an event and you listen to something like this, when people go from a conference or retreat and they're all pumped up or they're all excited and they're inspired, but more from the place of like being, I think it was like being high, right? And then after a week or two, or it kind of dwindles down. What is that about?
Well, we have different neurotransmitters in our brain. Dopamine, if it's taken to an extreme, and serotonin could get us into a manic pride euphoric state, a utopia, illusion and fantasy that we can build. And a good salesperson who uses rhetorical persuasion can sell you on the fantasy and get you really elated and ungrounded and unobjective and very subjectively biased and pulled into something. That's what salespeople do. I mean, a really caring salesperson knows that that's a short win. A real relationship builder is always going to think of equity and a long-term win. So for immediate gratification, the quick win is a quick sale, the rape and pillage approach. And I've seen that. And usually there's a fallout within the days or weeks that people back up and have buyer's remorse and regret, and they come down off that high. I'm not good at that. That's just not my thing, as you probably know. I'm probably terrible in those areas because I'm a guy who loves to give information out.
Right.
And so I built a brand around information, not my selling skills. But at the same time, there's a place for everything, because some things you wouldn't even get done if you hadn't been sold on those things, and that opened up doorways for you. So there's a place for everything. But the amygdala is more vulnerable to that. And the less experience you have, the more vulnerable you are to that. I mean, imagine a guy gets up on a stage and he says, for 1995, get my package right now and you'll be instant millionaire. In 30 days, you will be a friggin' billionaire. And you won't have to do anything. We'll do it all for you. All you got to is hit this button, buy this now, and you will be a millionaire. You'll have a house of your dreams and a yacht, and you'll have your penthouses and your fancy clothes. You'll be hanging out with the A-list, and they just paint the picture of the absolute blissful life, right?
Right.
So if you're sitting there and you're a real kind of DF, what I call it, not such a bright guy, and you're down in your amygdala, you go, whoa, man, that's what I want. I'm going to sell my house and take the equity out of it, or take the equity out of my house and get a loan to buy that thing. You're vulnerable to that. I literally watched a guy do an incredible sales job, and I watched him get $1 million in sales in about 20 minutes.
Wow. But
what happened was he was getting people to literally go and take money out of their house and sell against something, and then he left the country, and these people all lost, some of them lost their houses. He was a con artist, right. But he's a good salesman. He's like the guy that did the Wolf on Wall Street kind of thing.
Right.
And I watched this, and I got up on the stage afterwards and tried to counterbalance it because I saw what was going down. These people were vulnerable. But imagine if Warren Buffett and Bill Gates were sitting in that audience, and the guy was trying to sell that. Intelligent investor, Benjamin Graham, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If these guys were in the room, they'd just sit there quiet, or they'd probably just get up and walk out. They'd probably say, "This is ridiculous.
Right.
This is a farce." So an intelligent person knows that there's two sides to things and remains objective and asks proper questions intuitively to get those up to the surface so you're not blinded by an infatuation, resentment, an impulse or instinct. And the gullible person is going to want the quick fix because their life is unfulfilled. They're used to conforming to society, trying to live in other people's values, living vicariously through other people's brands, minimizing themselves, thinking fantasies as a compensation and dissociation from their traumatically perceived life. And then they're vulnerable. But if a person is methodical, sets goals that are congruent with their highest values, breaks things down to small bites, uses the Executive Center for Strategic Planning and inspired visionary work, executes those plans, has some sort of self-governance, and piggy banks become biggie banks. And little actions make big dreams, and they build momentum, and they build a brand around themselves, and they do something amazing. I'm more interested in that, in the long-term effect of that, and building a brand around that. That means I don't have the big rah-rah systems, but at the same time, I sleep at night well, and I know I've got thousands of people that say thank you in the long run. So I think that's just been my approach. But that's because I probably am too intellectual. I probably try to figure things out and look at things, too rationally. But in the process of doing it, it's helped me help people, and it's helped myself. And I've been able to be blessed to be financially independent and have, business around the world. And I mean, all the things that people say that they want, I've somehow been blessed to manifest them.
Yeah.
Not from a hypey kind of positioning, but just methodical, patient objectives that are met, serving people.
Right. Yeah. Without the hype. Yeah. I can. So, because I know you talk about, maybe that's the correct word, but that you don't believe in the so-called happiness because it's one-sided, right? How do you describe true fulfillment?
Well, it's interesting. A friend of mine sent me one of Jordan Peterson's videos. He's got some fun stuff out there. He's a little bit of a moralist and a little more bipolar than I am, but he's quite an intellectual. And he was talking about Aristotle's eudaimonia and meaning, the search for meaning, like Viktor Frankl would say, instead of the hedonistic pursuit of a quick fix of happiness. All the research that I point to and been researching for all these years, I guess I'm a bit of a stoic in that respect, is more about meaning and finding a balanced perspective in life. Because frankly, if I look at my life and I look honestly at it, I've had both. I've had happies and sads, and I've had so-called successes and failures, and I've had infatuation, resentments. I've had support and challenge. I've had pairs of opposites. And I did a research project. I told you that you had joined me at the Breakthrough Experience one time, and I told this story about what I did in positive thinking. I don't know if that would be helpful if I shared that.
Yeah, that would be awesome. That would be amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it was quite funny because I turned 17 years old. I'm going on almost 18. I meet Paul Bragg. I get inspired. I want to be a teacher. I come back to Texas. And when I get back to Texas, I take a GED, which is a high school equivalency because I didn't finish high school. Somehow I guessed and I passed. I took a college entrance, I guessed and I passed. I started college and I failed when I actually took classes that really meant things. And my parents wanted me to learn how to read, and so they bought me a book by Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking, actually a 3-volume set. So with a dictionary, I started going through it, and every word I didn't understand, I had to look it up, and there's a lot of them. And I'm thinking, I should be positive. If I'm positive, I'll have a happier life and I'll have better results and everything else. And I really got hoodwinkled into it. I call it the opium of the masses. And I started reading this, and then I noticed that, I get up and I go, okay, today I'm going to be positive. Good morning. How you doing? How's everybody? And smile. And there is a value in changing your physiology to change your state. No doubt about it. But it's not sustainable. And, if you go, I know a lot of people in the industry, and I'm sure you know a lot of them too. They have both sides.
Yes.
I have both sides. So I tried to do that, and I noticed that after a while I was going, well, I'm not staying up all the time. In fact, I'm now negating negative people. So I have my first negative thoughts is get rid of all the people that remind me of negativity that's now negative that I don't want to be around because they're reminding me of what I don't want to be like now. And I didn't have that before I started thinking positive thinking. I was friendly to people, but now no, I don't want to talk to those people. I don't want to be around those people. I want to hang out with only these positive people. It became an endless pursuit.
Yes.
I found out that I was now judging people left and right by their responses. And I was thinking, okay, And I was eventually negating almost everybody I met, because sooner or later I'd find them having negativity, and I'm going, well, this is crazy. So I felt kind of frustrated. And then I put the rubber band around the wrist kind of thing, and I thought, okay, if I have a negative thought, cancel, pop, this kind of thing.
Yes.
Punish myself for negative thoughts. Well, I found myself almost slitting my wrist. then I thought, well, I feel like a hypocrite. I feel like I'm going around trying to be positive, and then I'm biting my jaw sometimes because I'm really pissed at things sometimes. And I'm thinking but I don't want anybody to know about it. So I've got this public life, and then my downloading of all my negativity was going to my loved ones. It was really bizarre. It's like I'm putting on this facade for the people out there in the world, and then my closest loved one's girlfriend and everything else, they're all getting my negativity. And I'm thinking, this is bipolar. The people that are really important to me are getting the short end of the stick, and the people that really I don't care about, they're only paying me.
Yes.
The people that are paying me, I'm putting on a facade, and the people I'm paying for, I'm giving them hell. So I thought, this is bipolar. And finally, after 10 years of doing this, and I met Norman Vincent Peale. I met Earl Nightingale and his brother. I met W. Clement Stone, Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy, Mark Victor Hansen. I met every one of those guys that were, I thought, going to be positive. Tremendous Jones. I got to lecture with them, and I meet them and talk to them and hang out with them. They weren't positive all the time. They were just human beings like I was, with both sides, that were worthy of respect. But I had kind of this illusion that maybe they had figured it out, or they'd gotten it. I just need to keep hanging out with that and keep reading it. It'll come this somewhere.
Yeah. And
I was just frustrated as hell after 10 years of this. I'm 28 years old, and I finally decided I'm going to do a research project, because I'm a research guy. Hold on one second. Pardon me. Hello? That's fine, but I'm in the middle of a podcast right now. So tell them, yes, I could do it at 4:30. Thanks. That's a podcast in the middle of a podcast. So anyway, that's real life, right? Yep. And, so anyway, I figured I got to do this. I got to research this and find out what's true. So I decided to do a research project, and I got 300 of the best-selling books that were in the positive mental area, right? The positive mental self-help area. Uh-huh. Psycho-cybernetics, Magic of Thinking Big, See You at the Top, where tough times come, tough people get going, that kind of stuff. All this, Robert Schuller. I had all these books. And I went through and I circled every positive word in the book. So I literally, page by page by page, any word that was positive, I circled it. And I extracted it and put it by 3x5 index cards. And I had thousands of cards. So I bought them in packs of $100 and $1,000 packs. And so I transposed 2,000 of the most positive words from the 300 best-selling books onto index cards, neurotically. And people were going thinking, what are you doing, John? I said, I want to know the most positive words in the English language. I'm going to list them. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to meditate on each word on the index card, and I'm going to think of a quotation, an affirmation with that word in it, with the most positive word and statement I can come up with. So I ended up writing 2,000 quotations, affirmations. They're most upbeat, positive statements I could think of with those words in it. I'm double whamming now. I'm getting a positive affirmation, kind of a subliminal message, positive statements, positive words, and I wanted to do the condensing. And I put this 2,000 of them together, and I divided up into 365 days, so it comes out 5 to 6 quotes per day. And I put 4 on a page, and I wrote a book called 2,000 Quotes to the Wise, a day-by-day guide to inspirational living. And you can go online. Anybody can watch this thing. Go on and look that up. 2,000 Quotes to the Wise - Demartini. You'll find it. It's a real book. I sold 25,000 copies of it, and then I sold another 25,000 copies. Then we went to a 3rd edition. And they used it, Success Motivation Institute used it as subliminal tape material to put subliminal tapes during the 80s. This is 1983 now. Wow. So this went all over America, this is the most positive of the positive. And then what I did is I wrote this book. It had 93 pages in it. It had 4 days per page, and it had the most positive affirmations, words, quotations you could get into your brain. because I was under the assumption if I fill my main with only positive, I'm gonna be more positive and my life's gonna be better, this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So then what I did is I then made a chart called a day-by-day cycle forecasting form, fancy name. And I divided spiritual, mental, career, financial, family, social, and physical areas of life, the 7 primary areas of life that we have quest to master. And I then put a chart together with 31 days going across. So there's week by week by week, 4 weeks, and 3 days extra. And then I had each day divided up into 4 systems at 7 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 7 o'clock. So every 4 hours, I have a column per day of the 31 days. And then I divided each of the areas into +3, +2, +1, 0, -1, -2, -3. And what I did is I wanted to do an evaluation of how I felt during the day while I'm affirming these affirmations. So what I did is I got up at 6 something in the morning and I memorized the 5 to 6 quotes for the day and rehearsed them. And then I started affirming them with a little bead, rolling bead thing that I got from a japa bead from the East or a rosary beads from the West that had 108 beads on it. So I thought if these mystics would recite 108 times the sounds of God or the names of the saints or whatever, I'm just going to go ahead and recite these affirmations 108 times 5 to 6. And that means I do 600 basically plus quotes, affirmations a day minimum. And truthfully, I did about 1,000 at least. I mean, I was going all day long on these affirmations and just pulling them in my thing. So I'm now affirming 600 to 1,000 times a day, the most positive words, the most positive statements, the most positive affirmations, quotations that I could put into my brain. And I was monitoring at 7 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 7 o'clock during the day, how I felt in each of the 7 areas of life. Did I feel inspired or despired? Did I feel, mentally sharp or dull? Do I feel successful or failure? Do I feel, wealthy or poor? Do I feel close and intimate or distant from my spouse and family? Do I feel socially extroverted or introverted? And did I feel physically fit and vital and energized or feeling kind of low or blah or whatever? And I monitored it 4 times a day, honestly as I could. It took 10 seconds and average 4 times a day. So a minute a day of my effort. But the affirmations were constantly, and they were monitored. Once they're memorized, it's just going through my head all day. And I was following the beads, walking around with these things. Very neurotic guy. At the end of 2 years, 24 months of doing this.
Wow.
2 years. People look at that and they go, you are neurotic. 2 years of doing this every single day. And during that time, I had the highest bipolar symptoms I had ever had in my life.
Wow.
I was really manic and depressed kind of states. I then got a calculator out at the end of it, and I calculated all the numbers and ran all the numbers from all the ups and downs, 3, 2, 1, 0, 3, 1, 2, -1, -2, 1. And I monitored it all the way across and counted up all the numbers per area and mapped out all 24 sheets, because these are monthly sheets, and then totaled it up. And even though my intuition was screaming at me, saying that I hadn't accomplished anything, when I saw the numbers, it showed it. It was 0, 0, 0.1, 0, 0, 0, 0.2, 0, 1, 2. And I realized that I had accomplished 0.
Wow.
I mean, that all of my ups and downs, I had a thermostat inside my psyche around my true self-worth. And sometimes I had elevated self-esteem, sometimes depressed self-esteem. I was manic, I was depressed, I was elated, I was down. I was fantasying and then going into nightmares. I was having philias and fantasies and then nightmares and phobias. I was all over the place. But when I actually monitored and it came out 0, I was really depressed because I thought, wow, I just spent 12 years of my friggin' life pursuing a fantasy that I'm supposed to get one-sided, where nowhere in physics, nowhere in chemistry, nowhere in economics, no other ology other than physiology, psychology, sociology, and theology was there ever one-sidedness, which are the 4 opiums of the masses and the 4 largest institutions that control people. And I stopped and I realized that this is 0. So I then asked myself something that Paul Dirac, the Nobel Prize winner, said. I wonder, it's not that we don't know so much, we know so much that isn't so. So I thought, wow, I've been hoodwinked by an ideal in society that I've never even questioned. I wonder what else I haven't questioned, and it's time to question.
Right.
And I'd been studying on comparative religions and philosophies and things, and I could see that was more of an 18th century, 17th century, all the way to now movement of this positive kind of idea. It started with the Jeremy Bentham and the pursuit of happiness and the fantasy of this. And then when I got through that, I realized, I've still got negativity no matter what I do. I asked people by the thousands, how many of you still have negativity even though you've been a positive thinker for years? And they all put their hands up. And I said, so there must be a purpose to negativity or it would have gone extinct. And it's been around for thousands of years. So I must find out what its purpose is. And I did. I found out why we have negativity. Negativity is a feedback mechanism to guide us to authentic, objective goals that match what we really value and that have true meaning about, and to dissolve the fantasies that we get addicted to. Because the second we set up a fantasy, we have the nightmare in our mind counterbalancing it intuitively. So if I went to you and I said, Satori, you're always up, never down, always positive, never negative, always kind, never cruel, always generous, never stingy. And I said all these positive things about you. Inside your head, your bullshit meter would go off and go, well, not always, not exactly. And if I said all the negatives about you, your brain would go, not exactly. But if I said that you have both, like I have both, we'd immediately go, yeah, that's true. So we have a knowing and a certainty that we have both sides. But we have this fantasy that the dopamine of our animal nature that wants to avoid predator and seek prey seeks that opium, seeks that dopamine. And so we have that. And so the masses have been sold that fantasy, even though they can't live up to it. And that's the problem, that they're vulnerable to the fantasy, which creates the life of a nightmare. Instead of being objective and set real goals in real time that have real meaning, that are balanced, that actually achieve and accomplish things. I can't imagine building the Eiffel Tower without a plan and thinking of every contingency that could go wrong, or the great bridges over the waters, or the great buildings in the world. I can't imagine achieving anything great with just one-sided views and ignore all the worst things that could happen in that project. You got to have both.
Right.
Firm believer in meditating on the necessary evils in order to have that which is transcendent.
Right. Does it? Because even you said the other day when we met in LA at the workshop that you talked about fear and stress and how's your friend? Tell me more about that. Is that connected to this, right?
Which one's this now?
About fear and stress being your friend.
Yes. Well, I always say that there's really two types of fears: the fear of loss of that which you seek, and the fear of gain of that which you try to avoid. And those are also exactly the same types of stresses you have. In fact, I dare anybody, I've asked anybody anywhere to give me a stress that doesn't boil down to those two things. And they can't, because there's only two types of stresses. The fear of loss of that which you seek, which is prey, food, and the fear of gain of that which you're trying to avoid, which is predator, being eaten. So starvation and being eaten are the two basic biological fears that are underlying everything. Now, whether we transform that into the fear of not knowing, the fear of failure in business, the fear of loss of money, the fear of not having loved ones or rejection from loved ones, or the fear of rejection from society, or fear of ill health, death, or disease, or the fear of not being spiritually moral, all of those are the fear of loss of something or the fear of gain of something. So they still are just ramifications and derivatives of the two basic fears, of the two basic stresses that all people face. And if we are in our amygdala, that accentuates those fears. And if we're in our executive center, it mitigates and neutralizes and dampens those fears. The executive center governs those impulse and instinct distractions that we create fear with.
Yeah, and so when we think about like a lot of people in business and entrepreneurship and that suffer a lot from like overwhelm or stress, and they think that changing is really hard. First of all, like I don't know where that came about, but what is your belief about that? Is stress hard? Change, is that hard? Is it something difficult? Or why do we think it's so hard?
Well, we have a hierarchy of values, each of us. And whenever we're living congruently and in alignment with what our highest value is, we have the most resilience and adaptability to change. Because we're willing to embrace challenges in our highest values that we seek. So we're not trying to run from challenge, we're actually looking forward to challenge. Just like a boy who loves his video games, when he finishes one video game, he goes out to a more challenging video game because he loves that. That's just inspiring to him. And so anytime we're pursuing challenges that inspire us, we advance ourselves with a lot of resilience and adaptability, and we get creative and innovate, and our genius is awakened. But whenever we're not living in our highest values and we're conforming to society and idealisms and trying to fit in instead of stand out and try to be part of the crowd instead of being unique, we automatically live in other people's values and we start to conform. And when we do, our unfulfillment makes us look for immediate gratification, and we get in our amygdala and we look for a quick fix. And the fantasy we create, we have the fear of loss of. And the nightmare, which is its opposite, which is born at the same time we build the fantasy, we fear the gain of it. So we add to our stresses and add to our phobias the moment we're not living authentically. And that's a feedback to let us know we're not living authentically. So I always say that the fears are our friends because they're revealing to us when we're trying to live by a polarized animal nature and not living as a human being on our authentic nature. So we're here to live by highest priorities. If we don't fill our day with high priority actions that inspire us, we're designed to fill up with those low priority distractions that are the animal nature to frustrate us, to get us back to what's really priority. But we misinterpret it because we've been misled by the positive thinking movement. We're supposed to be positive. What's wrong with me? We're supposed to be positive. I'm not supposed to have negative events. That's all what's misleading people, because the reality is you have both sides in life, and trying to get a one-sided life. In Buddha, the Buddha says the desire for that which is unavailable, which is one side, and the desire to avoid that which is unavoidable, the opposite side, is a source of human suffering. And so we finally embrace both sides of life. Imagine being married. I mean, you're married for many years. Imagine being married and only allowing one side of her to be out. Right. The other side she has to cut. She can't do that side. Yeah. Or you imagine if she said, you can only be positive and talk nice to me. If you have any negative thoughts, we're divorced.
What a trap, huh?
Yeah. So the pursuit of one-sidedness is probably the most triggering of bipolar condition I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I had this conversation yesterday. I was speaking to a woman, a friend of mine, that she's in religion, and she's into religion. She's in the Mormon church, and she was talking about that, and like she's really seeking that, and she feels like she's constantly failing to live up to the expectations. What do you? I'm just curious. I don't want to go into that right now, but as far as more people understand the standards that are being set, and that if they're failing to meet those standards, they're not a good girl or good boy, or they're not following the dogma, they're not following the religion, and they're just hoping if I just when I get come to heaven, everything's gonna be great.
Yeah, that's the big delusion. There's a lovely video that everybody, I hope, goes on to the internet to look at. It's a priest talking about heaven and hell, and he's a scholar and he's brilliant. And he's talking about the illusion that the Catholic faith promotes, and the delusion, and how to control people, to keep them juvenile so they're easy to control, and that they're dependent. And the fastest way to disempower somebody is to promote an idealism that nobody can live by, and then they feel shamed, and then you sell them the opium. I mean, it's just a classical marketing approach. It's just like when you're doing selling. If you sell them all the pain, then the pleasure looks even better, and they'll buy the fantasy. I'm a believer that you get pain and pleasure no matter what you do. I don't give people pleasure. People say, well, Doc, I want to come to you. I'm in pain. I said, great, come on in here. I'm good at giving people pain. I joke with them. They said, well, no, you're going to get rid of my pain. No, I'm not going to get rid of your pain. I'm going to change the form of your pain. I'm going to change your back pain into pocketbook pain. They go, well, Doc, you're just joking with me. I said, no, I'm not. You're going to find out. All I do is change things. I don't get rid of things. And people don't get that. They keep trying to get one-sided life and get rid of the other half. And you don't need to get rid of any part of yourself to love yourself. But this happens in Christianity and various religions at fundamental levels, not the highest universal awareness of Christianity in these religions, but the fundamental level. And we basically are striving for that which is unavailable, the peace without war, the kind without cruel, the positive without negative. And the more we pursue it, the more we beat ourselves up because we think, well, what's wrong? We actually have people thinking that perfection is one side. The truth is the perfection is both sides. And as people keep wanting to go and find the false perfection and miss out on the magnificence of their own perfection. The perfection is that they have both sides. They're a human being with a set of values. When you support those values, you're nice. You challenge the values, you're mean.
You're with that when you say that, because I think a lot of people, probably even listening to this right now, because a lot of people talk about values, and I know this is one of your cornerstone things that you really go into. And people think about, honesty or integrity or all these social norms about. How do you describe values? Different than, what we just said.
Well, a lot of people that think of values, they immediately think of these moral, aptitudes that are, honesty, truth, and everything else. Diogenes, a philosopher at the time of Socrates and Plato, who used to make spoofs out of Plato and Socrates. He used to challenge these guys and make fun at them. And he lived in a barrel, and he was a character, you know. But he went all over Europe trying to find an honest man. He never found one because he realized that there is no such thing as an honest man. There's a human being that will tell the truth when they perceive there's more advantage and disadvantages to doing, and they'll tell a lie when they perceive there's more advantage and disadvantage to do it. And most people say, no, I'm not a liar. I'm being honest. And then they come to the breakthrough experience, and then they come in and they think that their opinion about somebody is the truth. And then I have them go through a process, and I have them realize that that was a subjective bias that they didn't realize that they thought was their truth, which turned out to be a subjective opinion. When they look at that, they go, oh my God, I lied about that person. And then I say, now, how many of you probably have thousands of people you've done that to? And they all put their hands up and they go, my whole life's basically a distortion.
Yes.
And if your senses are elusive at best in interpreting reality. So when you look at this, you realize that being honest is sort of an ideology, and you're going to be honest. The real honesty is not about being honest and back and forth with people, but the honesty with yourself about what's really true for you and really valuable to you. And the real values are things that are important to you, that you want to import into your sphere of awareness and influence and bring into the world as an expression and identify. And then what those things actually boil down to are from all the judgments we've had where we've been infatuated with people and too humble to admit what we see in them is inside us, and we disown that, or too proud to admit what we see in them is inside us and disown that. And those disowned voids in our life want to be fulfilled, and our values are fulfilling those judging voids that we've stored in our life to try to help us love and appreciate people. When we do, we realize that along the way, we've been living with all kinds of distortions and what we've been calling truths that have been opinions. And eventually we get really humbled, and we actually find out that when we actually fully see the truth, we actually have a gray state of love. And most people don't stay there. So they're oscillating through these false ideals of honesty instead of real honesty, real truth. And real truth is an expression and fulfillment of our real path of the fulfillment of our values in life. And we can have integrity, but it's not something so much the pursuit of. It's something that when we live authentically according to what we value and live by priority, we automatically express. And so I'm a full believer in prioritizing your life and living congruently and delegating lower part of things and then serving people so you have the income to delegate with, so you can do something you can't wait to get up in the morning and do, because you're way more resilient, adaptable, and way more owning of your own hero and villain that way. You know, I'm not a hero or a villain. I'm both. I'm not a saint or a sinner. I'm both. I'm not somebody to admire or despise. I'm both. I'm all the above. I went through the Oxford Dictionary and found out that I had 4,628 of the most positive and negative traits in the dictionary. I had them all. Right. There's nothing missing in me. And if under different settings, you'd be surprised what people will do. If your child's walking by and somebody's about to run them over, you'll do whatever you can to do it, and you'll attack somebody to protect your child. We have the capacity for every action. So to label ourselves with a narrow mind and put ourselves in a box and try to say we're this person only, and put a kind of a archetype instead of a real full-blown expression of all the traits, to me is an illusion.
Yeah, I've heard you speak about this also, about how living according to your values really brings about physical symptoms and disease if you're not. Tell me more about that. And also, I'd like to know, with that thought or with that question, is that your perspective on how maybe environmental toxins, how that affects your health as well, and how that,
Well, anytime, because you have a set of values and you evaluate your world, anything that supports your values activates sort of like the parasympathetic nervous system. Anything that challenges it, the sympathetic. One's a rest and digest, one's fight or flight. Those nervous system expressions of the autonomics have neurotransmitters that go down to the cell walls through the circulatory systems and go to the cell walls and activate glycocalyx or glycoproteins, cause conformational changes, activate certain enzymes with second messenger mediators, and then cause kinase or phosphatase enzymes to cause methylation or acetylation of histones in DNA and change the expression of DNA and make the cell respond by defense or procreation, multiplication of cells. So apoptosis, it destroys, or mitosis. And it causes the protein manufacturing of proteins that are used for functional proteins of enzymes and structural proteins for structures. And we literally create symptoms in our body to let us know what we're perceiving out there in the world. And we're doing it through epigenetic expression. So every perception we have is affecting our physiology down to the cell level and also into the macro level, our musculature, etc. We've all seen muscles of facial expression as an example. But the whole body is a muscular expression system. And so all of our muscles in our body are revealing motions. And there's a whole science of that I've been very fascinated by. So our psychology is affecting our physiology, and our physiology affects our psychology. If you stand a certain way and put your arms up and out like that, it tends to release serotonin and makes you feel more confident than if you go like this, which releases serotonin. So it works both ways. You change physiology, you change psychology. Change psychology, it takes physiology. So anything we can do to master our physiology and psychology gives us our power back instead of drugs and other modalities to approach it. And we depend on other people when we do that. So our illnesses are done that way. But also you've got environmental toxins. But we have a biotoxicology liver and kidney and skin that is amazingly capable of handling almost every toxin. In fact, in biotoxicology, the textbook, you'll find out that there's not one toxin that our liver can't handle unless it's in high concentrations for too long a period of time. So we have the capacity to detox just about anything that ever happens. But we could die from water or air. If we get too much oxygen, too much air, we can die. So anything is toxic under the too much for too long. But we can have the ability to adapt to it if we're able to maximize a balanced state of mind. The more we balance our mind, the more our detoxification systems handle our environment. So our environment does play a role, but our ability to respond and adapt and be resilient to that environment is really the factor we have control over, more so than just the immediate environment.
Right. Wow, that's awesome. That's amazing. Question, you talked about delegating lower priority stuff, right, in order to focus on the more highly productive and meaningful activities. And I know people have different kind of excuses or rationalizations, but I can hear people thinking like, well, if I don't have the finances to delegate low priority activities, what do I do? Like, what's your take on that?
Oh, that's a simple one. It never costs money to delegate properly. When you go and delegate, the purpose of delegation is this: to make a list of everything you do in a day. And you make a list of every action you take in a day. Next to it, put a list of what does it produce per hour. Next to that, put down what is the meaning of it on a 1 to 10 scale. How much meaning does it have? Next to that, put a list. What does it cost to buy somebody or delegate that to somebody? What would it cost to hire somebody to do it to the same standard as you? The next one is how much time is spent on it. And the last column is to reprioritize the entire thing according to what produces the most income with the biggest spread versus the cost of delegating, and that has most meaning. So you're finding the thing that is most inspiring and meaningful, most productive per hour, and has the biggest spread. That you can the least spread, so you can delegate it, the rest. Then what you do is you hire somebody by taking a layer at a time and creating a job description that matches something that actually produces less per hour, that costs less to delegate than you, and allow you to go and produce more, the thing that produces the most per hour. And if you do that, the production increase that you get way then more compensates for the cost. And if you hire somebody that's inspired, that has a high value on doing it, so you don't have to micromanage them and oversee them, they'll do a better job or greater job than you will. And that's what the mastery is. So it doesn't cost to properly delegate. What's it for is if you don't go do the difference, you delegate it and abdicate it and give it to somebody else who's not competent, that you got to micromanage and distract and get frustrated by and have to do it again and not do the things that produces the extra income. That's what costs money. Right. Never costs to properly delegate.
Right. That's cool. And it's interesting to see that because a lot of people get distracted and they find other ways to not do the thing that they think that they should be doing anyway. And therefore the productivity is not there. So how about people, I probably hear people talk about work-life balance. Do you believe there's such a thing as balance? Like, what are your thoughts on life balance?
It's all perceptual. Beware, I always tell people, don't put yourself in a box based on some social ideal or some other person's value system, because you'll go crazy. If you try to fit into everybody else's value system, you'll end up scattered, chronic fatigue syndrome, trying to please everybody all the time. It's got to be based on what's true for you. I mean, I've somehow, the way I look at life, as I travel the world, my social life is my seminars. I mean, this is my social life. My business is my seminars. My intellect, I'm getting to share my intellect. It's part of my seminars. My economics, my income, seminars. My sex life, because I tell really terrible sex jokes sometimes in there. My sex life is in the seminars. I mean, if I look at it, my family's there too, because I'm interacting with them just like family. And my kids are now, two of my daughters are working with me in the seminars.
Yes.
So when I look at it, I'm getting all the areas of my life fulfilled, but it's not in a classical work, 3 hours for the family and 3 hours for this. Beware of the box about how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
You have a hierarchy of values, and that may not match those other people's boxes, or some idealism that somebody wrote because they're frustrated or something. You can't go by other people's values. You got to go by what's true for you. And you also have to live your life authentically, because otherwise you're going to be subordinated to an idealism that's not you. You got to give yourself permission to be you. Yeah. And my idea of a work-life balance is my work-life balance, the way I perceive it, not somebody else's. I had a woman come up to me in the seminar and says, Dr. Demartini, you're a terrible father. And I said, how come? And said, well, you hardly see your kids. I said, well, why would you want a terrible father seeing his kids? That's sick. And she goes, you have a damn answer for everything I throw at you. I said, well, that's my job. I'm a teacher. I said, oh, it's frustrating talking to you. And what she had is a very high value on children, and she would feel guilty if she wasn't with her children every day. So she was projecting her values onto me and trying to imagine how bad that would be if I was in his boat. Right. But that's people are always projecting their values onto you, trying to get you to fit in instead of stand out. But it's you having the courage to stand out is the key, and be able to be true to yourself and authentic to what your values are, and not worry about what society's expecting.
What do you think? What do you think people are so afraid of actually? I mean, being apologetic or trying to minimize themselves to not to fit in.
Well, it's a biological thing of the animal nature inside us. It's a vicious cycle too, because in thousands of years ago, how many we don't know, but man has been around a lot longer. Human beings have been around a lot longer than we thought. I've been studying anthropology, and we're much older than we think. And from those really early, you might say, nomadic periods, where we were kind of hunter-gatherer possibly, we wouldn't survive on our own very well. We had to join with a group to survive, to be able to catch big enough game, to be able to survive on calories. And it kept getting more efficient by getting with the group. And then we had kinship, and then that way we could diversify. And the second we started to get to sedentary life, 12, 14,000 years ago, we started having a division of labor and, hierarchical structures. And it became necessary to be able to have economics and fair exchange. And as we did, we realized that we do more efficiently with our specialty economically and a standard of life. And so we depend on other people. But that doesn't mean we can't stand unique. It just means we have to be strong enough to know what our values are and master the skill of communicating what we want in terms of other people's values in a fair, sustainable manner.
Yeah, I love
that. If we do that, we've mastered the game.
Yeah.
I teach people equity theory and fair exchange and sustainability is the only thing that's going to last. And almost every autocrat that goes to one extreme eventually gets humbled through history. We see all the heroes right now falling right now all over the place. We got all these people that are, people thought, oh, they're heroes, and now they're finding out that they got all kind of other sides. The biggest one the other day was the El Mundo church guy, right? He's the biggest Christian guy in freaking Latin America, and now he's up for pedophilia and bringing sex trade for young girls. I mean, God knows what he's done. So in the process of doing that, here's the hero and the villain coming up again. And the more he's trying to put on the hero, the more he's got to hide the villain. I don't hide any of them. I'm a hero villain. I'm a kind, cruel, nice, mean hero villain, and I don't try to give up. You see me in my seminars. I'm a sacred, irreverent person.
Yes.
And so in the process of doing that, people are afraid to be by themselves because they don't survive, and so fitting in is scary. Not to fit in, you have to fit in.
Right.
And so that means now here's the paradox: the majority of people are not Nobel Prize winners. The majority of people are not, gold medalists. The majority of people aren't the wealthy. They're not the most successful. They're not the most beautiful. You stop and think, those are less than 1%ers. So if you fit in, you're going to almost guarantee to be one of the 99%ers, not the 1%ers. So if you want the 99%, fit in. Buy a dummy dumb pill and fit in. But if you want to go out and be the 1%ers, you're going to have to be able to be courageous enough to stand out, because the only people that have actually changed the world are those people. Right. They're the ones that made the biggest difference in the world. And we all want to make a difference.
Yes.
We can't make a difference trying to fit in. We make a difference by standing out.
Right. Okay, I know you got to go. So let me ask you the last question here. Well, two things. One is, what would be your top three advice for someone that want to really build a thriving business?
Well, I think the first thing to do, a lot of entrepreneurs project their assumptions onto the marketplace and think they know what the world wants because they happen to. And then they bang their head against the wall, climbing uphill against a resistant, demand. Make sure you find out what people really, 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 really are looking for, and then find a way of communicating what you want in terms of that. You go farther. You got to find something that's inspiring and meaningful to you. You have to find out what's the dominant buying motive of people collectively, or the target at least that you want. Find out where they overlap, because there's a vesica Pisces of two overlapping circles there. And in that, there's where productivity occurs. And finding that niche is important, and most people don't take the time to do it. They go out there and project onto it and assume that everybody's supposed to be excited about what they're excited about. And that usually means they're blind to what the market's asking. If there's no demand, somehow you're not missing the market. You're missing the market. You're not getting in the market. Right. So make sure you really care enough about humanity to serve humanity if you want to be wealthy. Because the people who are wealthy, they serve humanity. And I ask people, how many of you ever use Microsoft Windows? Everybody puts their hand up. And the reason why is because it serves people. Right. Windows has been one efficient system that's helped us save time. I don't know if you remember before Windows what it was like. You had to shut down this thing, open up the computer under another thing, and then you couldn't cross-crisp things. It was just crazy. So now that was a major savings of time. That saved enormous time for human beings. So anything that's effective and efficient that serves a need is a moneymaker. And so people who care about humanity find what people need and figure out ways of directly or indirectly brokering or creating that need to fulfill that need. Start there. The second is to find out what you're inspired by, so you can't wait to get up in the morning and do it, and find where that niche is. And the third is to make sure you pay yourself right from the beginning, because until you value you, no one else is. Yeah. That's the best thing I ever did in my business, was to forcibly accelerate my savings or whatever I earned and not wait to see if there's extra at the end, but just force it into savings and value what I'm doing. And the more I did, the more people valued me. It was really quite interesting. But those three things will help a person. Yeah. Prioritize what they do every single day and make sure they're sticking to the highest priorities and delegating everything less than that, so they can get on with doing what's meaningful, which produces the most, and then save the hell out of it.
Yeah, beautiful. I really appreciate you being here with us, John. And I can't, it would be a lot, I'd love to have you on again and deep into another topic. This has been amazing. How can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about what you do, how you change people's lives?
Well, the easiest way to get a hold of me is simply go to drdemartini.com. And that's, just DRDEMARTINI.com, drdemartini.com. If they go on my website, they can probably spend the rest of their life on there. There's thousands of interviews. There's YouTubes, there's videos, there's podcasts, there's products, there's reading and articles. There's tons of stuff on there. It's an educational as much as a commercial website. And that's the best place to find out where I'm at. If you look under the events, you can find out what I am around the world, at least the public events anyway.
Yeah, we'll put the website in the show notes.
Yes.
Beautiful.
And also, another thing they can do is, on the website, there's a value determination process, since we talked about values. Mm-hmm. It's a complimentary value determination process. If they want to take 30 to 40 minutes of their time and go through it, it could save them an enormous amount of time on setting goals and making sure they're congruent. So taking the time to do it, it's a private thing they can do, and just to look at what exactly really is their values and what's really important, so they can structure goals that are congruent. That could be helpful on the website.
Yeah, that'd be great. Actually, we did talk about this in a previous episode, and we talked about that regarding setting goals and making sure that those goals are in line with your values. And I mentioned your questions there. So, yeah, go check it out if you haven't done that. Yeah, beautiful. I appreciate so much spending time with you, and can't wait to talk to you again.
Yeah, and thank you for joining me the other night in Los Angeles at the program with your wife and you, because there's you guys in the back, and I can see you both smiling, because I'm bombarding people with ideas, and then some of them are like, whoa, like getting hit by a baseball bat with ideas.
Right.
I've seen you guys chuckling in the back, kind of smiling and knowing, because you've endured me, and you've had radioactive resistance now to know how to handle me. And it was fun to look back and see, guys. So thank you for supporting me, and thank you for the opportunity to be on your show. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Boom. How do you like that? Hey, if you're thinking, I want some more hands-on training, I wish I had someone who could keep me accountable, keep my mindset straight and help me grow. And if you want to be part of a community of badasses just like yourself, you can go to halfassedbadass.com and join the waitlist, because we are in the middle of creating something super cool. And if you're liking this experience, the community we're building will blow your mind for sure. We haven't officially opened the doors yet, but by getting your name on the VIP list, you will be the first to know when we go live. Sound exciting? We are very excited. Actually, the more accurate word would be inspired. I can't wait to share this with you. So it's super easy. Just go to halfassedbadass.com and get yourself on the VIP list right now. Talk soon.